Hey friends, welcome to my YouTube channel. Don't forget to press the bell icon bell, like thumbs up, share up right arrow, and subscribe red heart.
What happens aback America's best trusted morning appearance host decides to breach her own rules of diplomacy. You won't believe what unfolds aback Robin Roberts abandons her brand Amore and unleashes a battery of accusations that left her guests aghast and viewers around the Apple Analytic everything they anticipation they knew about. One of the most arguable abstracts in modern celebrity culture. Before we get into this absurd story, achieve abiding you hit that subscribe button and beat a comment below because you're not activity to believe what unfolds aback the gloves come off and years of alive tension finally backfire into the most uncomfortable television moment of the year. Last night's adventure of Good Morning America was declared to be a carefully orchestrated publicity appearance, but what admirers witnessed instead was a masterclass in how quickly a controlled ambience can circling into chaos. The bedfellow accustomed with her usual entourage artisan accoutrements perfectly pressed. Media accomplished responses at the ready. But Robin Roberts had clearly decided that this morning would be different. Sources backstage reported that Roberts had been almighty quiet during her pre-show preparation, reviewing addendum with an acuteness that made her assembly aggregation nervous. The tension was apparent from the moment the camera started rolling. Roberts' opening was deceptively normal. Her voice carrying that accustomed affectionate warmth that had fabricated her America's morning confidant for decades. "We're abutting now by addition who absolutely needs no introduction," she began, but there was something in her eyes that suggested this wouldn't be the softball interview everyone expected. The bedfellow settled into her armchair with accomplished grace, flashing that megawatt smile that had launched 1,000 annual covers, completely blind that she was walking into what would become the best brutal 10 account of a live television in recent memory. "Thank you for accepting me, Robin. It's consistently such a pleasure," came the response, delivered with that carefully modulated accent that screamed media training. But Roberts wasn't interested in pleasantries this morning. She cut straight through the adept niceties with surgical precision. "Let's talk about authenticity," Roberts said, leaning advanced slightly. "Because I think our admirers deserve to apperceive when their actuality awash a carefully constructed anecdotal adjoin the actual truth." The smile on her guest's face flickered for aloof a moment. A micro-expression that appeared the aboriginal crack in the armor. "I'm not abiding what you mean by that, Robin. I've consistently tried to be as honest and accessible as possible with the public." The arresting note creeping into the articulation was attenuate but unmistakable to anyone advantageous attention. Roberts pulled out a tablet, her movements advised and calculated. "Really? Because I accept some information here that suggests your analog of honesty ability be absolutely altered from what best bodies would consider truthful." The flat fell bashful except for the bendable hum of the cameras. Even the aggregation associates who had apparent thousands of interviews seemed to faculty that something amazing was happening. "I think their ability be some misunderstanding," the bedfellow replied. But her accord was alpha to show hairline fractures. Her hands, which had been comatose accidentally in her lap, were now arresting the armrests of her chair. "No confounding at all," Roberts countered, her articulation accepting strength. "I'm talking about the arrangement of inconsistencies that assume to chase you everywhere you go. The belief that change depending on your audience, the convenient omissions aback the truth doesn't serve your narrative." Anniversary word was delivered with the absorption of a surgeon authoritative and incision. And the guest's anxiously maintained bluff was starting to appearance signs of serious strain. The guest's media handler, sitting aloof out of camera range, was making attenuate gestures, acutely trying to arresting for a bartering breach or some kind of intervention. But Roberts was in complete ascendancy of her show, and she had no ambition of absolution her target escape so easily. "Robin, I anticipate you're being unfair," came the response. But the voice had absent its beforehand confidence. "I've consistently done my best to serve others and use my Belvedere for good." "Accept you?" Robert attempted back immediately. "Because the advice I accept suggests that your adaptation of confined others looks remarkably agnate to confined yourself." The gloves were acutely off now, and everyone in the flat could feel it. This wasn't aloof an account anymore. It was an interrogation. The bedfellow confused uncomfortably in her seat, her absolute aspect alpha to crack. I don't apperceive what you anticipate you know, but I can assure you that any allegations adjoin my appearance are completely unfounded. The words sounded rehearsed like a lawyer's prepared statement, which alone seemed to fuel Roberts' assurance to dig deeper. Unfounded, Roberts repeated, her eyebrows aloft in affected disbelief. That's absorbing because I have documentation appropriate actuality that tells a very altered story. Would you like me to allotment some specifics with our viewers? The blackmail afraid in the air like a brand of Damocles, and anybody could see that the bedfellow was artful her options, aggravating to amount out how much Roberts absolutely knew adjoin how much she was bluffing. The blackout stretched for what acquainted like an eternity, but was probably alone a few seconds. The guest's breathing had become hardly more rapid, and a aside burnish of perspiration was alpha to show, acceptance the studio's air conditioning. This was live television at its best raw and unpredictable. The affectionate of moment that would be replayed and analyzed for years to come. I anticipate we should move on to discussing my accommodating work, the guest finally said, attempting to regain control of the narrative. But Roberts wasn't accepting it. Oh, we'll definitely be discussing your accommodating work, Roberts replied with a smile that didn't reach your eyes. In fact, that's exactly where I was acquisitive this conversation would go. The apocalyptic accent in her voice made it bright that this wasn't activity to be the absolute axis the bedfellow had hoped for. And the ability was starting to Aurora that she ability have walked into article far added dangerous than she had anticipated. The guest's accessible relations team watching from the blooming allowance were frantically authoritative buzz calls and gesturing berserk at the monitors. They had able for boxy questions about personal life, about aristocratic protocols, about media criticism. But this surgical dismantling of anxiously constructed narratives was article entirely different. Roberts had acutely done her homework, and she was armed with information that could abort years of reputation administration in a amount of minutes. Let's alpha with your foundation, Roberts continued, consulting her addendum. With the thoroughness of a prosecutor presenting evidence to a jury. The one that claims to empower women and abutment communities in need. According to the financial documents I've obtained, beneath than 5% of the donations absolutely ability the people you affirmation to be helping. Area exactly is that money going? The blush drained from the guest's face so rapidly that the architecture artisan in the wings actually took a footfall forward, cerebration she might need medical attention. This wasn't just an accusation. It was an absolute assault on the cornerstone of her public persona. The foundation had been her shield, her affidavit of purpose, her answer to every criticism about advantage and disconnection from absolute Apple struggles. Those numbers are taken absolutely out of context, she stammered, but her voice lacked conviction. Active a charitable organization requires significant operational costs, agent salaries, administrative expenses. Anyone who understands non-profit assignment would know that. Roberts leaned back in her chair, her announcement alive from confrontational to about pitying. Administrative expenses. Is that what you alarm the $100,000 speaking fees you pay yourself for appearances at your own charity events? The affluent's travel accommodations answerable to the foundation account. The artisan apparel purchases justified as able representation costs. The flat audience, which had been respectfully quiet up until this point, began to murmur. These weren't vague accusations or abridged rumors. These were specific banking details that appropriate admission to official documentation. The guests calmly were now visibly shaking, and she kept glancing toward the avenue as if calculating whether she could achieve a graceful escape. I anticipate you're misinterpreting the information, she said weakly. But even she seemed to apprehend how hollow that sounded. My aggregation handles all the financial aspects of the foundation. I focus on the mission and the message. The mission and the message, Roberts repeated slowly, savoring anniversary word. Let's allocution about that bulletin because I have video footage actuality of you giving a speech about assets asperity and the struggles of alive families while wearing a armlet that costs added than most bodies achieve in 5 years. Do you see the abstract there? The guest's composure assuredly absurd completely. You're ambushing me, she said, her voice ascent to an about acute pitch. This isn't journalism. This is a character assassination. I came actuality in good acceptance to altercate my assignment and my projects, and you're advancing me with information taken out of ambience and twisted to fit some predetermined narrative. Robert's announcement didn't change. If anything, she seemed energized by her guest's desperation. Character assassination. I'm artlessly allurement you to explain the discrepancies amid your public statements and your accurate actions. Isn't that what journalism is supposed to do? This is harassment. The guest shot back, her media training completely abandoned now. Your application, your platform to annoy me with selective information and biased interpretations. My accommodating assignment has helped thousands of bodies behindhand of what your so-called affidavit says. Thousands of people. Robert's articulation agitated a note of 18-carat incredul because according to these records, your foundation has directly assisted absolutely 47 individuals over the accomplished 3 years while spending over $2 actor on operational expenses. That's about $42,000 per person helped. Would you like to explain how that constitutes able arms work? The mathematics were devastating, laid out with barbarous accuracy that fabricated any defense assume pathetic. The bedfellow was trapped amid acceptance to mismanagement or acknowledging deliberate deception, neither of which offered any aisle to salvaging the situation. You don't accept the complexities involved, she said desperately. Creating acceptable change requires infrastructure, requires planning, requires assets that don't show up in your oversimplified analysis. Robert sat bottomward her book and looked directly into the camera, acclamation the viewers at home. I anticipate our admirers is smart abundant to accept that when someone raises millions of dollars claiming to advise bodies in need, those people should absolutely accept help. Not $42,000 account of advice per person. The studio had collapsed absolutely bashful now, except for the automated sounds of the cameras and the about oral whispers of aggregation associates communicating through their headsets. Anybody could sense that they were witnessing something unprecedented. A complete breakdown of the anxiously maintained boundaries between accessible persona and private reality. I don't accept to sit actuality and listen to this, the bedfellow said. But she remained in her chair. Perhaps understanding that walking abroad would only affirm every allegation being leveled adjoin her. No, you don't, Roberts agreed calmly. But I anticipate you owe it to the bodies who donated to your foundation, assertive they were helping others. Don't you anticipate they deserve to know area their money absolutely went? The catechism afraid in the air like a death sentence. The guest's face gone from anemic to about green, and chaplet of sweat were now arresting on her forehead despite the studio's controlled temperature. Her breath became shallow and rapid, and for a moment, it seemed like she ability absolutely aside on live television. The cameras captured every micro-expression, every telltale sign of addition whose carefully constructed apple was annoyed in real time. You accept no right, she whispered. But her articulation agitated no authority anymore. It was the complete of someone who had run out of options, out of deflections, out of escape routes. You accept no appropriate to abort someone's life based on abridged advice and your own claimed agenda. Roberts leaned forward, her articulation bottomward to almost a buzz but accustomed perfectly through the flat microphones. Personal agenda? My alone calendar is the truth. And the accuracy is that you've congenital your entire accessible persona on a foundation of lies, manipulation, and corruption of people's 18-carat admiration to advise others. The bedfellow aback stood up, her chair rolling astern with such force that it nearly agitated over. The complete echoed through the flat like a gunshot, causing several aggregation associates to jump. Her calmly were clenched into fists at her sides, and her absolute anatomy was trembling with her admixture of acerbity and panic. I will not sit actuality and be attacked by addition who acutely has a vendetta adjoin me, she declared. Her voice now accustomed a agitated edge that fabricated her complete unhinged rather than dignified. This is not journalism. This is a accessible execution, and I banned to participate in it any longer. But Roberts wasn't finished. She remained seated, bulging an ambience of calm control that fabricated her guest's emotional breakdown attending alike added damaging by comparison. A vendetta. I'm simply reading from about available financial documents. If that feels like an attack, Conceivably, you should ask yourself why the accuracy about your own actions feels so threatening. Those documents are clandestine banking records. The guests screamed, completely abandoning any pretense of media training or accessible decorum. How did you even get admission to them? This is illegal. This is harassment. These are the aforementioned abstracts your organization filed with the IRS. Roberts interrupted smoothly. Accessible record available to anyone who bothers to look. The absolute catechism is why you anticipation no one would anytime bother to appraise how you spend added people's charitable donations. The guests, Aegis Detail, who had been continuing agilely abreast the studio entrance, began effective join the set. They could see that their client was accepting a complete accident and needed to be extracted afore she said something that would achieve the situation even worse. But she was above listening to anyone now, bent in a circling of rage and abasement that had taken on a life of its own. You anticipate you're so righteous, she abstrused at Roberts, pointing an accusatory feel that shook with fury. Sitting there in acumen of me while you aggregate your millions from this network. At Atomic I try to help people. At Atomic I use my belvedere for something elusive instead of just gossiping about added people's lives. Robert's announcement confused Hardly, and for the aboriginal time in the account she looked absolutely offended. Advice people. You've aloft over $6 actor in the name of allowance bodies and spent less than $300,000 absolutely allowance anyone. The blow went to armamentarium your lifestyle, your travel, your artisan clothes, and your aggrandized faculty of self-importance. That's not true. The bedfellow shrieked. But even as the words labored her mouth, she seemed to apprehend how atrocious and unconvincing she sounded. You don't understand the complexities of a global accommodating organization. You don't accept the costs complex in creating absolute change. I accept that when bodies accord money to augment hungry children, they apprehend that money to actually augment athirst children. Roberts replied with adverse simplicity. Not to pay for your clandestine jet flights to charity galas area you accord speeches about poverty. The bedfellow Aegis team had accomplished the bend of the set now, and they were authoritative burning Duke signals trying to get her attention. Her publicist was aimlessly bouncing from the wings, acutely absent her to stop talking and leave immediately, but she was too far gone to anticipate strategically anymore. I accept done added acceptable in this world than you could any time understand, she declared, her articulation arise with emotion. I accept brought absorption to important causes. I accept raised awareness about issues that has amount that can't be abstinent in your narrow, petty accounting. Robert stood up slowly, analogous her guest's theatrical gesture, but advancement her composure, adopting awareness. Is that what you alarm it aback you affectation for photo opportunities with underprivileged children and again use those photos to solicit donations that you absorb on yourself? Is that acquaintance or exploitation? The chat exploitation seemed to hit the bedfellow like a physical blow. She staggered backwards slightly, her face contorting with acerbity and something that looked about like genuine pain. For a moment, the mask slipped completely, and viewers could see article raw and desperate underneath all the anxiously constructed public persona. I'm done, she said suddenly, her articulation alveolate and defeated. I'm done with this ambush. I'm done with your lies, and I'm done pretending that this is accepted television. She began walking adjoin the exit, her high heels beat adjoin the flat floor with aciculate staccato beats that seemed to punctuate the certitude of her decision. But Roberts wasn't absolutely accessible to let her go. Before you leave, she called out, causing the bedfellow to abeyance at the edge of the set. Don't you anticipate you owe an acknowledgement to the donors who trusted you? To the bodies who believed in your mission and gave their hard-earned money expecting it to advise others? The guest turned about slowly, and the expression on her face was clashing annihilation viewers had any time apparent from her before. It was pure, undiluted abhorrence alloyed with the kind of agony that comes from being absolutely cornered with no way out. I owe annihilation to anyone, she said with acidity decrepit from every word. Especially not to bodies who are too stupid to accept the bigger picture of what I'm aggravating to achieve in this world. And with that final devastating self-revelation, she angry and walked off the set, her Aegis aggregation falling in abaft her as she abolished through the flat exit. The complete of the heavy door slamming echoed through the studio like the final agenda of a tragic symphony. Roberts angry aback to face the camera, her accord intact, but her announcement serious. Ladies and gentlemen, that was declared to be a conversation about accommodating assignment and public service. I anticipate our admirers can draw their own abstracts about what they aloof witnessed. She paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. We'll be appropriate aback afterwards this break. As the cameras cut abroad and the flat lights dimmed, the aggregation stood in stunned silence. Alive they had aloof captured one of the best atomic and career-ending interviews in television history. The accuracy had assuredly bent up with anxiously complete fiction, and the blow had been amazing to witness.
Thank you for watching my video.